Good evening. I'm Socrates Garrett, and we're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, the heart of the Deep South, right here in the African-American-owned broadcasting studio. We believe digital.com, our own platform. And so it's critically important that in the African-American community, we control the narrative. I look forward to receiving opportunities to show and advertise your products for goods and services and to move your brand along in this community. We're broadcasting live on Facebook. When We Believe Digital Podcast, go to Roku and download our app, and We Believe Global, with shows like this to bring articulate, intelligent conversations and dialogue to our platform. So I'm here to continue sounding the alarm. This is how the South is going to rise again. Good evening and welcome to Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting live right here from Jackson, Mississippi, in the heart of the deep, deep South. You know, I was born in Mississippi, and that's why I'm here today, because this is the place that I should make a difference. This is the place where my father attempted to make a difference. And so we're broadcasting live. And let me just send a note to my engineer. Okay, a little technical difficulty there. And engineer, let's give me a start time on the clock out here. And so we're broadcasting live right here in Jackson, Mississippi. And I was beginning to say that, you know, I'm here because I'm continuing the legacy of my father. My father was W.E. Garrett in Madison County, a man that gave his whole life to advocating for the improvement of his race, an individual that taught us how to work and how to have faith and how to stay involved in the struggle. You know, he was a man that was listed in the Sovereignty Commission report as someone that they had to keep an eye on. I remember early on when in the early 60s, when he wanted to have civil rights meetings in the church, he was not allowed to do so. And rightfully so, people were afraid of what the Klan might do. And so he built him a convention center, which consisted of a 3-room shack with a little conference room in it so that he could have his meetings and discuss about how the black man is got to survive. He never had a real job. He never worked for anyone else. I think he tried it for a week, and it was not for him. You see, his father never worked for anyone either. And so, you know, it comes to me naturally to be an individual that wants to control his own destiny. You know, the beginning has not been easy for any of us. My grandfather was a man that built churches and married people all over the state of Mississippi. His name's on the marquee up in Center, Mississippi, and Farm Haven, Mississippi, and Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And I have no earthly idea how he got to all of those places. Well, most travel back then was by horse and buggy. His father was a traveling salesperson, European. And so my great-grandfather grew up not knowing his father. He was a bastard child and certainly had no heritage, no lineage that he could lean on to try and find his way. And so he did the next best thing. He married into the Brown family. And the Brown family consisted of some real entrepreneurs and landowners, etc. And so this line of Garrett's comes out of that tragic beginning in many ways. I don't really want to call it tragic because if it had not occurred that way, if God had not allowed it to happen that way, then I wouldn't be here today. But I was born there in Madison, Mississippi, and times were tough. I was born in 1946. Times were real hard back then for African Americans to try and make a difference, and try to be landowners and try to keep on their farms and try to be independent. And so most of us were rooted back in the woods. You know, we were so far back in the woods you had to pump sunlight in there. And then they decided to build Highway 16 from Canton to Carthage. And the highway went right by our door. And so all of a sudden we were on Main Street. And so, you know, it was tough times. A little tragedy here and there. We didn't see many white people then because we were pretty much a closed society. Nobody came back there, and nobody came in our space. And so we produced everything that we were going to need. You know, we had a 3-acre garden, grew everything that the family needed except sugar and flour, as I recall. So we got a lot of cornbread made from meal because we didn't have a lot of flour. And so, but we made our own syrup. We had the mill, the grist mill, where they just go round and round all day, grinding up the sugar cane that we grew and harvested and made syrup out of that. Went to the woods and cut all of those butterbean poles and planted them in the garden and make sure that those beans would run up those poles. That was hard work. On the farm, we were raising cattle and hogs and doing a little farming with cotton. We weren't very good at raising cotton. My daddy planted 18 acres of cotton and made 4 bales. It just really wasn't his thing. He was a lumberjack. He ran his own sawmill. And we had a lot of trucks. And we hauled a lot of pulpwood. And we worked extremely hard. There was never a day off. In the mornings, we would go to the field to pick cotton. Before we went to school, my mom was a school teacher, started teaching school at 18 years of age. And so we were in a house that believed in education. My dad only had an 8th grade education, but my mom eventually graduated from Tougaloo College and went on to do some postgraduate work as well from that humble beginning. And so, you know, we had a great family structure, even though the times were difficult. Now, I'll share some things with you here just so that we don't forget in terms of the Jewish community says never again. Some things we just can't forget. And so I was 13 years old when Emmett Till was brutally murdered up in Money, Mississippi. 13-year-old boy. And right then, we experienced trauma and stress like we've never known before. You know, people talk about the stress of the Ukraine people, and it's tragic and it's difficult for the Ukrainians. But we've all experienced the horror and the stress of war. And so we were traumatized. Those kind of events are designed to put a ceiling on your expectations for yourself. And so we had to fight our way through that. Then one Sunday morning, my father gathered his boys up and put us in the car, and we drove out on the Natchez Trace. And he took us out there to 3 greasy spots in the middle of the Natchez Trace where my cousins had been run over, killed, castrated. Difficult times as a young boy, having to go through that. And through all of that, my father had the courage to want to run for office. And he decided that he was going to run for supervisor in Madison County, 1979. And we knew then that all of his family and children and my mother's career as a teacher, that he was jeopardizing all of that because of his belief that the black man could do better and be independent. And so I come out of that kind of background and that kind of environment. And times got so hard until my uncle was driving the school bus. And because he decided to pass another school bus that had white children on it, he was met by the Klan. They ran the bus down, opened the door, and took a shotgun and shot his hand off and his eye out just because he dared to pass the school bus. It was difficult in Mississippi. We all know about the 3 civil rights murderers and how that tragedy unfolded. We know about the assassination of Medgar Evers. We all are familiar with that here in Mississippi. We all know how brutally the murder of Vernon Damer was, how his home was burned down and he was murdered because he dared to register blacks to vote. And through all of that, there were always some strong, good white people that tried to make a difference. Horace Germany up in Philadelphia, Mississippi, was a white man up there with a dairy farm that tried to make a difference. He actually married my oldest sister. And he was burned out. His farm was burned down. He was ran out of Philadelphia, Mississippi, and resides somewhere out in Texas. He was willing to put his life on the line to try and make a difference so that blacks could have a better quality of life and would not be under the oppressor forever. But times were difficult. They were so difficult until my mother took all of her children and sent them to Pineywood School. In that Pineywood School, I learned some things that have stayed with me for the rest of my life. You see, I knew all how mean and hateful that white folk could be. But when I got to Pineywood School, my instructors were white Europeans that had come down from the east to try and make a difference in what was going on down in Mississippi to educate young African-American children. My English teacher, Dr. Chandler, was a doctor's degree that was teaching English to 9th and 10th graders down at Pineywood School. And they would talk about how the world was not as cruel and didn't have to be as cruel, and that we all needed to love one another. And they showed tremendous love and caring for African-American children. So I was confused. How is it that same group of people that were shooting and destroying the lives of black people, and the same group of people was trying to spread love and hope in that same environment? Lawrence Jones started Pioneer Wood School. He moved down here from Ohio, and his motto was very simple, that if you put a student on one end of a log and a teacher on the other end and a book in the middle, that you had a university. And he started to teach, and his help came from white folk in Rankin County that helped him build a school that was recognized in America as one of the top boarding schools in the country. We all graduated from there. And so Mississippi is a very interesting place. We have to remember the sacrifices that were made by so many to give us an opportunity to improve our quality of life, and the role that James Meredith played when he stood his ground to enter the University of Mississippi against all odds, against the Governor Ross Barnett, standing in the doorway saying not under his watch would no Negro enter the University of Mississippi. University of Mississippi was the premier school. It was white folks' school. If you went to the University of Mississippi, you didn't even have to pass the bar exam. If you graduated from Ole Miss, then you had to be smart enough. No one needed to test you. And so when James Meredith dared to enter Ole Miss, I've followed his career and talked to him on many occasions about why. And the thing that stuck with me the most of all my conversation with him was that I wanted to restore my people. I wanted to restore my people to the leadership roles that they had held in previous times. And so it was drilled in me that the restoration of the African American was part of my responsibility. And I don't care how hard I tried to get away from it. I don't care how I tried to blend in. I don't care how much I tried to say that we're in a post-racial society. It just doesn't work. I just can't seem to get away from this advocating for the improvement of lives of black people. As a business person, I've always known that I was going to be a business person, studied business at school at Alcorn State University, where I graduated, but more importantly, where I was nurtured into a leader, allowed the opportunity to be a leader, something that HBCUs do for our kids that they can't get at Yale and Harvard and Ohio State, UCLA. You don't get leadership training. Not designed for you. And so that's why most of African American leaders come from HBCUs, because they have two things. They have a commitment to the legacy and the heritage and the history of African Americans, and they have leadership skills. They may not be as smart. The curriculum may not have been as tough. They may have had fewer doctors on campus to teach, but they gain something that you can't learn. And so I experienced all of those wonderful things, then went on off into the United States Army. Interesting thing that happened on my induction into the Army. I immediately had to learn how to take orders from people that didn't look like me. This was my first experience with that. And it didn't go well for me. I think I was a PFC, private first class, in the Army, making $112.50 per month. And I was told by a Japanese sergeant major that I was to pick up cigarette butts from the latrine there in Fort Lewis, Washington, in a barrack that I didn't live in. And I told him I wasn't picking up any cigarette butts in a barrack I didn't live in. And I said, furthermore, you're the problem that we're having today because you bombed Pearl Harbor. He didn't take kindly to those remarks. And so the next day I was called in and informed that I had lost my PFC stripes and that I was now a private first class again. Now my monthly salary was $87.50. But I was in the United States Army, drafted there to fight for my country in the middle of the most devastating war that we've ever seen. That's the Vietnam War. I went in there in 1969 and graduated not graduated, but was honorably discharged in 1971. You know, this program is being brought to you by Socrates Garrett Enterprises. We are a premier construction company right here in Mississippi. We're getting ready to go to a station break, and all of our viewers that are watching us on Facebook, on YouTube, on our own platform, WeBelieveDigital.com, and on Roku TV, thanks for joining us. We've been seen in over 139 countries and throughout this entire world. So we're getting ready to go to the station break, and we're going to come back right after this message.
Socrates Garrett ENT.com is a diversified firm specializing in recycled aggregates and crushed concrete. Socrates Garrett ENT.com's recycled materials provide the construction industry with significant economic and environmental benefits by recycling clean concrete rubble into M.Dot grade rock materials. Recycled aggregates and crushed concrete can be applied to driveways, road construction, bank protection, parking lots, general bulk fills, and more. By using Socrates Garrett ENT.com's crushed concrete products, anyone from homeowners to general contractors can help reduce landfilled concrete waste, conserve natural resources, and gain significant economic savings on materials and disposal costs. For more information, please call 601-896-0084 or visit us online at SocratesGarrettENT.com.
We're back live. Welcome again to our show. We're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi at We Believe Digital Broadcast Studio. You know, it's an African-American owned studio in a black city. Jackson is 85% African-American. So we're proud to be able to get the word out. We're proud to have an opportunity to come into your living rooms and come into your homes and just chat for a minute about things that have gone on in our state and things that are going on and what we'd like to see in the future. You know, we have to get this word out. So as I was saying, I was in the United States Army and got honorably discharged and came back to Jackson, Mississippi. Now, many people wonder, why would anybody that had had that experience want to come back to Mississippi? Well, you know, I ask myself that question a lot. And so the only thing I can think of is that this is where my father's work was done. And this is where everybody knew me by my name, but more importantly, they knew me as his son. And that was a tremendous head start for me, to be able to follow in the footsteps of my father and my grandfather, my great-grandfather. And so that it brought me back. And I came here and got a job at Xerox Corporation in 1973. And this is now under the time when affirmative action was really being put in place. You know, there are two events that for me that have been really significant. And oddly enough, and one of them is not the Voting Rights Act, but it was the affirmative action that insisted on corporate America recruiting and employing African Americans. And so Xerox Corporation recruited me, and I was employed by them in 1973. In Mississippi, it still was a hostile place to be, an environment that was still, ripe with racism and discrimination. I remember going out as a salesperson to make a sales call on the Chancery clerk for the city of Jackson. And when I walked in the office, he looked at me and then he dropped his head. He never looked up at me again. And I made my entire sales presentation with my head down and with his head down. He did buy a copy machine from me, and I appreciate that, but he never looked at me. Signed the document, slid it across the desk, and told me I could leave now. That was the environment that we had here. And so all of these events become a part of who you are and what you're trying to accomplish. I went on to become probably one of the best salespeople and promoted by Xerox Corporation all the way up to branch sales manager. Had offices in 5 states: Shreveport, Mobile, Pensacola, Jackson. And with all of that racism that was going on, I found myself achieving. I found myself beginning to make a good living, to be able to move into the middle class. And just when I thought I had been accepted by white folk in Mississippi, the opportunity for me to be promoted to branch manager came, and I was told that I was not ready for that job and that I needed to go to Rochester, New York for some additional training. Being the best salesperson that they had, I took exception to that. And I couldn't handle that. Hold on one second. Caller, you're on the air. Can you hear me, caller?
Hey, this is Benny Foster. How you doing, Mr. Garrett?
Caller, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me, caller?
Hey, Mr. Garrett, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi, this is Benny Foster calling in. Salute you, sir.
Hello, Benny Foster. How are you?
Hey, man. Awesome, man. Awesome. I just wanted to call and say, first of all, we salute you, man, and we appreciate all that you're doing for the city of Jackson. And I wanted to ask a question. I wanted to pose a question to you that I think I will get an honest answer from.
Yes.
How do we go about restructuring the infrastructure of Jackson? Because we are hurting each and every day from the news reports we're getting of the young people killing each other. We're hurting from the situation that you guys were speaking about with the garbage contract earlier. We're hurting because we don't want to, first of all, come together and help each other. And I wanted to ask you, because I believe I can get an honest answer from you, what are some strategies that you feel like we should take in order to restructure our infrastructure here so we can begin to see the change that we know we rightly deserve?
Well, thank you for that question, Benny. I am going to get to that a little bit later on in the show in terms of, the infrastructure issues and the crime issues that we have. But I'll deal with it a little bit at this point. The key to reclaiming, rebuilding is effective leadership. There is no other way. There is no other way. You have to change leadership. You have to get to a point where everybody that says that they're representing your interests is standing tall and taking that fight on, regardless to the consequences to them personally. And until we get that, there will be no change. So there's no magic bullet. You got to have effective leadership, and that leadership's got to go to work.
Okay, I have an additional question from your response. How do you feel like we went astray with the leadership that's in place? I'm pretty sure the voters felt like we were voting for the right people. Of course, I only been back 4 months, but I do know that I would not be voting for most of the people that are currently in office because I don't see any presence. I don't hear them offering hard solutions on the issues we're facing, the challenges that we're facing on a day-to-day basis. I see leadership in people such as yourself, other people that are connected with in the community. But as far as the leadership we have now, what do you think that we went wrong originally with, voting these people into office? Do you think they just didn't have good intentions, or do you think that this is an overload and maybe they're not adequately equipped to handle the situations that we're facing right now?
Well, there's a series of things that occurred. And that's why, I take the first part of this program to try and establish where black people came from and how, as a black man, what I had to go through to even get to this point. But there was a series of things that started to occur. And quite frankly, it started with integration. And at the point in time that we moved into integration and we start turning our children over to other people to be the guardian over, to teach and to handle our children, and our children began to have a greater appreciation for people other than their parents and their ancestors. And they no longer had a commitment to the struggle of African Americans. They had, in many ways, arrived. They were in a post-racial society, and they'd rather be getting along and rather be accepted than to take on the fight that's necessary in our community. And so it started there with integration. And after that, it has just continued with broken families from bad public policy, and we get a situation that we're currently in.
Wow. I'm gonna respectfully say to you that I think it's gonna take all of us working together at this point. That ain't been where it started, but I truly believe in my heart that if we all come together and look past those differences, and that we will be able to do more than restore the city. As you say, the South will rise again. And so I just want to say I do appreciate your leadership, and I appreciate everything that you're doing, the We Believe platform, and we're praying and believing God that more leaders such as yourself will not think about their own lives, but they will step to the forefront and begin to lead us out of this mess, man. I really appreciate you taking my call tonight.
Thank you for calling.
Yes, sir.
All right. We appreciate the caller. We're going to have to work our way through some things, but we first got to acknowledge what the problem is. We got to put the problem really on the table where we can look at it. You can't fix it until you identify it. And the problem is that we don't have committed leadership to a struggle that we have endured over the years. And we don't have a commitment to make amends for the pain and suffering that have been put upon the African American community. And so we're going to have to deal with that. We're going to deal with that with the leadership issues. But you see, you got to go through some things and understand some things. So I was fighting my way up through Xerox Corporation, as I was saying, and I did not get the promotion to branch sales manager that I deserved. And then they wanted me to go to Rochester, New York, where it was cold. And then I had a white gentleman say to me, now I'm branch sales manager in a major corporation. This is vice president that's talking to me. And he says to me, well, let me give you another benefit, a reason to go to Rochester. I said, what is that? And he said, well, black girls are easy to spot in the snow. And I said, wow, Why am I in this environment? Why am I dependent upon anybody to make a living? Why aren't I following in the footsteps of my father and my grandfather and being my own man in my own business? And I left that company that same day and started my own business. And so we have to have an experience that sets us apart. Now, I've tried to work across racial lines. I've tried to work across various political ideologies. I've tried to do everything I can to work with whomever would attempt to try to correct the things that have gone on and make a better living for our people. It just has not worked. It just has not worked. You know, I've fought extremely hard. I rose to the rank of chairman of the Greater Jackson Partnership, a 2,300 member white organization right here in Mississippi. My picture hangs on the wall down there now. I've tried. I've reached across the aisle and worked with Haley Barbour when he was running for governor and became governor, across those political lines to try and see if we could make some inroads and make a difference. I tried. It just has not worked. And it's something about individuals like me that just will not allow them to be quiet and stand idly by and watch what's wrong continue to happen without saying anything. And so people like me are blackballed by individuals, both in the European community and the African American community, because you cannot be controlled. And when you cannot be controlled, then you will be under attack. And the attacks are severe. I remember when Continental Tire Company came into Jackson, Mississippi, and we were the largest African-American construction company, civil construction company in the entire state. We put forth the best proposal that you could ever want to see, teamed with a major firm as well out of Georgia, and we were not even shortlisted. And yet, the African-American community was paying the tab. The Hines County was putting in $20 million in the project to help Continental come here. And when I spoke to the leadership of Continental Tire Company, they told me, well, we already heard about you. I said, what? He said, yeah, we already heard about you. I said, imagine that. And so when I went to Darryl McQuarter, the supervisor that represented Clinton, and asked Darryl McQuarter, I said, Supervisor, why is it that we are not given an opportunity to participate? He said, I don't know what it is, but it goes all the way to the top. It goes all the way to the governor's office. It goes all the way to Phil Bryant. He said, I can't do anything. And I said, I understand. So I've always dealt with those kinds of things. Now, where we're going to now is what's happening in the black community, because now, as John Horn puts it, Senator John Horn, he says that the black folk are out white folking the white folk. Now imagine that. And so we now move into an era that Martin Luther King and the rest of all those martyrs that I gave their names earlier fought and died so that blacks would have a right to vote, so that they would be able to change the conditions in their community. And so now we got black leadership. Every time an African-American city goes 60% black, it has a great opportunity to elect an African American leader, and we did that. And then the African American leadership began to treat aspiring businesses, black businesses, worse than the Europeans were doing. I personally did a lot better as a business person in Jackson, Mississippi, under Kane Ditto, the white mayor, than I'm able to do under the current mayor. And I say that with a little degree of hesitancy, because while in this current administration I don't enjoy any favor, but the current administration is making an effort to bring opportunities to other black businesses, especially the one with this garbage contract. And for that, I give them all the credit in the world, because it's not about me personally. It's about advancing the opportunities for African American businesses. So this current administration, in my opinion, is taking a fight that no other mayor would take. Mayor Chokwe Lumumba is taking on a fight to try and make absolutely certain that an African American firm is treated fairly and given an opportunity that no other mayor that I know would take on. We had a series of black mayors going back to Harvey Johnson, which was our first African American mayor, and Maynard Jackson spoke at his inauguration ceremony. And so they were connected, and they had a real commitment to developing a strong black business class. Then after them, we had a series of mayors that was not a high priority for. And so we didn't gain anything in the community under black leadership. And now we're continually spiraling downward under that leadership. So we're going to have to change and have effective leadership. And when we come back, we're going to talk about what's going on really wrong here in Jackson, Mississippi, from the economy, from black businesses, and how they are being hurt and absolutely robbed of any chance to grow and sustain themselves. We're going to go to a commercial break, and we'll be right back after this message.
SGECOVIDsolutions.com is paving the way forward for a safer city government, delivering cutting-edge biosecurity and biosafety protocols developed internationally by top virologists and scientists using an all-natural cleaning solution, killing COVID-19 on contact like no other product on the international market. For more information, please call 1-800-281-9080 or visit us online at SGECOVIDsolutions.com. Let SGECOVIDsolutions.com provide innovative rapid facilities testing and world-class state-of-the-art biorisk safety protocols for all of your coronavirus needs. Call 1-800-281-9080 or visit us online at sgecovidsolutions.com.
Hi, I'm Q Talicia Garrett. I am here to introduce our New South Development and Training Outreach Hour every Tuesday at 2 p.m., giving you information on how to become a part of the programs through USDA and Farm Service Agency. We can be reached at 678-779-9468. We can also be found online at newsouthoutreach.com.
Welcome back to Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting live right here from Jackson, Mississippi. We're in the heart of the deep, deep South, a place that I love. I don't love its history, but I love Mississippi. You know, Mississippi has less than 3 million people in the entire state. You can drive for days and days and not see anybody. When I was in Chicago, you can't turn around without somebody being in your face. So Mississippi is a special place. We got to deal with some issues that are continuing, that have always been a part of Mississippi history, and that we have made no gains We made gains in a lot of areas, but we have not made any gains in the sharing of this economy. And so we're going to have to change that. Now we're going to talk about the economy. Let me give you a little history here. Several months ago, Mayor Chokwe Antar Lumumba was forced to go out for proposals for a garbage collection contract. And I say forced because state law says that after 35 years of the same company having the same contract, that you have to bid it out. Now, you only have to do that after 35 years. And so the mayor sent out a request for a proposal. Now, when he sent out the request for the proposals, 3 firms responded. Waste Management, a national firm, FCC, a national firm, and Richards Disposal, an African-American firm out of New Orleans, Louisiana. The mayor went through his process, the selection process, and selected FCC to be recommended to the council as the new provider for garbage collection. Our Jackson City Council, which is made up of 7 council people, 1 from 7 each ward, and 5 of those are African Americans. We have 4 African Americans, men, and 1 African American female. The African American Council, along with the European, a white minority, voted to deny the mayor his recommendations for FCC. They didn't give a reason. They just voted it down. Now, after it had been voted down twice, the law prevents you from bringing it back up again. So the mayor was forced to declare a state of emergency. He declared a state of emergency, and he went into negotiation with a local firm that was owned by 3 African American men, one of which was myself, Charles Pickett, Dwayne Pickett, and Lee Bush. The mayor negotiated with us in good faith and entered into an emergency contract with us to pick up the garbage. Now, this was a great day because there are few economic engines that a city has that it really can make a difference with. And this garbage collection contract is a prize contract. And so when the mayor went before the African American City Council and say that he had entered into a contract with local African Americans to pick up the garbage, the council voted that there was no emergency declaration, and therefore the contract that he had entered into was null and void. Now, after tremendous mobilization costs and preparation costs for a local African American firm to pick up this garbage, all of that was wasted. Tremendous expense was incurred by National Waste United. And this council paid no attention to the fact that African American local people were being denied an opportunity to provide garbage collection services in a majority black city. They didn't see the significance of that at all. There was no discussion about that at all. They simply voted down the emergency declaration and nullified our contract. The mayor then was forced to enter into a 6-month contract with Waste Management just to keep garbage from piling up in the city streets. And during that process, he submitted another request for a proposal. This time, he hired a new attorney, and they wanted to go about making absolute certain that the process was clean and that no one could challenge it, there would be no appeals to it. So they came up with a strategy of a blind bid process, meaning that the mayor wouldn't know who responded and whose proposals wouldn't have any names on them, and that the mayor would go into a series of town hall meetings in every ward, identifying what the citizens wanted. Did you want once a week collection? Did you want twice a week collection? Did you want collection with bins, without bins? All of those discussions happen in every ward. Eventually, it was decided that they would have the garbage collections process picked up with the bins. Now, the mayor said we had a blind bid process. We don't know who's responding. So after all of the evaluations were completed and they brought back the recommendations from the committee, Rich's Disposal Service had won the bid. Their price points was $1.2 million less per year than its closest competitor, Waste Management. The mayor proudly presented the recommendation from the committee and the administration to our council. A black man now is our low bidder. This council voted it down. This council indicated that they didn't want a black man to have this contract in this black city. They voted it down twice, and then went into actually sued the city, hired an outside lawyer, and sued the city, and went to court trying to get the court to give them the authority to override the executive branch and award a contract. During the presentation of the contract, this council actually struck through the name of Rich's Disposal Service and wrote in Waste Management on an order, and went to court to try to get that affirmed by the court that they had that kind of power to overthrow the executive branch. Of course, denied that and said that you're way out of line. Only the executive branch can enter into a contract. This council would not agree to a contract with this African-American firm. So then the mayor then, under another emergency declaration, issued a contract to Rich's Disposal Services and gave him a notice to proceed while the court hearings were ongoing. But you see, garbage would be piling up in the streets of Jackson, and we'd have all kinds of health issues and all kinds of violations and fines from EPA if he doesn't get this garbage picked up. So he issued a notice to proceed to Rich's Disposal Services. And over the last 45 days, Rich's Disposal Service has picked up the garbage off the streets of the city of Jackson, kept the streets clean, demonstrated that they're capable of doing the job, submitted their invoice last week for payment, some $800,000. This council voted to not pay the bill. And so now we have an African-American firm that has picked up garbage in our city for over 45 days, and the council will not pay for their services. And we hear all kinds of ludicrous comments coming from this council. One council person says that if it ain't broke, let's not fix it. Another one says that if a little boy comes by with his lawnmower and cuts your grass and you didn't ask him to cut the grass, you don't need to pay the little boy. These are the kinds of responses that we're getting from a council when the balance of life and death for a lot of African American firms and families are at stake. You see, if you don't pay Richards, then he can't stay in business. He can't pay his people. Then he loses his drivers. He loses all of his employees. And then you say he failed. We didn't want him anyway. Another council person says that the proof is in the pudding. Told you so. And we have those kind of shenanigans going on in Jackson, Mississippi, a city where 42% of its population lives below the poverty line. They're playing some serious games here in Jackson, Mississippi, designed to keep the black man down. You see, the trickery is so obvious and so evident that even the president of the city council, white female, now you have to help me understand how a white female can become president of a city council that is comprised of 5 African Americans and 2 whites. How can that even happen? That's Tarzan and Jane stuff. How can that even happen? But yet it did. And so now the president of the city council votes to award the contract to Richards Disposal Services. And we were so proud of her. We thought maybe we were having a breakthrough. And then when Richards Disposal Service submitted his invoice for payment, this council person voted against paying the bill. That's the kind of trickery and buffoonery that we have going on here in Jackson, Mississippi. You vote to award the contract, and then you vote against paying the bill. That's some form of entrapment. And so Jackson is under siege. We have lots of things going on that just don't make sense. We had the recognition of the African American holiday, the first holiday, Juneteenth, the first year it's being nationally recognized. And one of our local churches went before the council to request that they help defer the cost of the fireworks for this national holiday, Juneteenth. This African American council voted down the request, would not fund $6,000 to $8,000 to pay for fireworks. Black people voting against the celebration of black folks coming out of slavery. Then we had a black rodeo coming to Jackson, Mississippi. They've been coming here for 19 years. Now they had a request for additional security. This council not one time stepped up and said that the economy that benefits to the city of Jackson is so critical to us, and we want the black rodeo to be here, that we'll pay for the additional security. Never once would they stand up for that under black folk. Then the state of Mississippi put in a commission to rule over the 1% sales tax that the citizens of Jackson, 85 to 90% of the vote was in favor of Jacksonians taxing themselves 1% to improve their convention center and improve their infrastructure. And although Jackson citizens voted to do that, the state of Mississippi put forth a commission over those funds. Now, none of those people on the commissions have been elected by the people of Jackson that voted to tax themselves. You can tax yourself, but you can't be in control of your own money. Now get this. The commission then turns around and spends 70% of the funds that is collected from the tax in the white district. 70%. And those 5 African-American council people sit there every day and don't say a word. They support that. They vote for that. But when it comes to a black man, when it comes to an African-American, you vote to not pay the bill after he has performed the services. Something wrong here in Denmark. I'm sorry, wrong here in Jackson. Jackson now has 2 police departments. The Capitol Complex Police Department that the state legislature put in place to patrol over the Capitol grounds and extended it out as far as Jackson State University. So they have 1/8 of the city under their control. 2 police departments. They have 108 officers in the 1/8 of the city, and the rest of the city, with the Jackson Police Department, has 200 officers. And then we scream about crime. And so we have gotten to a point now where a city, when you didn't even have to lock your doors 10 years ago, you weren't worried about it, now has obtained the status of being the most dangerous city in America, right there with St. Louis. 154 homicides last year. Murder rampage is onward and upward. And nobody wants to talk about why. So many things are happening to us, and our leadership is silent. We're about to lose our airport authority. The legislature's tried to take it already. We lost the wastewater treatment plant. There's a move underway to take the reservoir that was built for the city of Jackson that provides drinking water, to take it away and give it to the Pearl River Valley Authority, because Jackson sells water to Nissan and other industries, to destroy every revenue stream. We're going to have to come together. We're going to have new leadership. I'm going to continue to support Mayor Antar Lumumba in his efforts to do the right thing here. I appreciate what he's doing. No other mayor I know would take this challenge on. And it's going to be brutal. And you've already experienced how brutal it can be. But our forefathers died for the right for you to have that job. And yes, then you ought to be willing to lose that job, fighting for the rights that your forefathers fought for. And I appreciate you in the stance that you're taking. We're going to have committed leaders. Jackson has the largest constituencies of elected officials of any other state in both the House of Representatives and the Senate. Our city is run by blacks. Our school district is run by blacks. Our airport is run by blacks. Our county is run by blacks. And we are 42% under poverty and black businesses get less than 2% for contracts for goods and services under black leadership. And so we're going to have to make some changes. We're going to have to reward and support those that are taking a stand. And for all those that are on the wrong side of history, because history is not going to be kind to individuals that vote against the interests of black folk in a city that is predominantly black. History won't be kind with this. And your political careers are at stake. And it's maybe already too late. But you gotta see the burning bush. And you gotta make a change and do the right thing. Now, we're not gonna continue on any longer tonight. But this conversation, this subject matter is a long ways from being over. I want the world to watch what's going on in Jackson, Mississippi. I want African Americans and political and elected people all over the USA to watch what's going on in Jackson, Mississippi. Because where there's no vision, the people perish. And when you don't see that if an African American firm can pick up the garbage in Jackson, Mississippi, that it spreads hope in Baltimore, in Atlanta, in Memphis, in New Orleans, in Mobile. If you can do it in Jackson, don't you know that blacks in Tennessee will rise up and do it? We're going to have to fight for this. We're going to have to take on family members and loved ones that are on the wrong side of this issue. And we're going to have leadership that's committed to making a difference in this community. Now, we got a holiday coming up, Memorial Day holiday. And blacks gave everything that they had, not only in these wars, but in these streets. And we ought to remember that. We ought to remember not only our soldiers, we ought to remember those advocates that died and gave everything that they had. We ought to remember the business community that's struggling, that's under attack, under siege. We ought to remember all that. And after these holidays, let's get together, come together, put forth a contract that every elected official is going to have to sign and agree to if they want to continue or if they want our support. They're going to demonstrate that they're committed to the improvement of the African American community. Enjoy your holiday and stay safe. Good night.
Advertise on WeBelieve.global, a brand new digital media platform. Share your brand with our audience on our many global live stream TV broadcasts and over the radio. For more info, visit WeBelieve.global or call 800-492-51